They focused on some personal and social development, soft skills, fine motor skills, writing and math skills, colors and shapes, that type of stuff. And it was incredibly impressive to see, what these students could do. It was kind of a crapshoot. I wasn't sure how it was going to work out, but they came with a full curriculum. We had about 10 kids. They just had their graduation this past week, so. An example of one of the events that we might do is we did a Black History Month event in February. We had about 60 people there. We did an art exhibit with four local artists. And so the theme of the art was Black history, culture, or people of color as subjects. And we had over 40 pieces, which was really cool to see. And we also had some African drumming. And then we did a panel discussion of, I actually think it was 6 speakers, but kind of questions focusing around the Black experience in New Hampshire. And then we screened a documentary about Shirley Chisholm. So a few of the things that we are planning for this summer, again, we're trying to mitigate some of the issues that Nashua might be dealing with, at the community level. So we're working with the Nashua School District to offer an ELL summer camp twice a week for 20 to 25 first, second, and third graders who are in that summer school. So they will be bused over to the center from 1 to 4, and they'll go through different stations. But we also, because we have that computer lab of 6 desktops and 30 Chromebooks, they have additional access to their ELL programming. So we wanted to couple, some extra time in their programming with some enrichment activities as well. So that's Wednesday and Thursday. One day maybe we'll go the full Monday through Thursday that they're in school, but slow and steady. And we're also doing a couple of STEM mini camps. So we're partnering with the UNH Extension Program for mid-elementary school and early junior high school to make mousetrap-powered cars. Not something I know much about, but it sounded cool and a good enrichment activity that focuses on STEM. So you'll see in the budget, my budget's a little different. It covers utilities, so that comes all out of city buildings. And if you look at electricity, heating, gas, and water, they all went up marginally, and that's really just because there's more activity in the building. The other part of the budget is really the trust fund. So starting in FY 2020, we're strictly going to just that trust fund, and we're going to be, I'm building a website that makes it a little easier for people to donate, so we're really going to be funded just off of donations. So the spreadsheet I gave you lists everything, everything there. I think we came in, let me take a look, but I think about 13,000 less this year than last. And we actually just received a couple of donations, so our trust fund balance as of today is $6,012.31. And so that's mostly programming supplies and materials.
Okay. Is that the last slide?
Yes, it is. Let me just.
Questions?
Yeah.
Alderman Jettie.
You talked about you rent space there to various groups, but I don't see anything on the revenue side. Am I missing it?
So, no, that's a good question. It's actually because it's a trust fund. It's a donation, but that really wasn't up and happening until about a month ago. So I'm not sure if that would even be reflected yet. I think we took our first private party rental in March 9th. So.
Alderman Jettie.
And you've got a lot of programs. Do you do all that by yourself, or do you have? I don't see any. I see you're the only paid employee.
Yes,
How
that's
do you
right.
do the other programs?
So it's run by mostly volunteers. I think, if you look at the breakdown, it's events that we're doing or programs that we're doing, or we're partnering with people for the space. But it's just me there full-time, and then we do have volunteers that will come in and run. So the skill building, for example, I'm kind of there in the background to get them what they need, and take care of the building. They're coming up with the curriculum.
My guess is we're gonna be asked to develop a special revenue fund that funds can go into, that they can use. There are several, they're in the pink pages of your budget with various things. Many of them are in the school department. Okay, any other question? Alderman Clements, then Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you. So you mentioned that your budget was going to go to donations. Does that include your salary, or would that still be
No,
in the
that's
regular?
still that one line under the
Okay,
department.
good.
Yeah.
Good. That makes me feel better. I'm sure it makes you feel better too.
Yeah, donations just so that we can, put on programs, buy supplies.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. No, I think that'll be. I think you'll find success with that. You're doing a lot of good stuff with a short amount of money, so I commend you on that, and I wish you success. And hopefully, I'll have time at some point to come down and take a look.
Yeah, I'd love
So-
to give you a tour. There's still all the artwork up, and it's a great space, and we're, slow but steady. We do have a lot of stuff going on, so it's exciting. Yeah.
Great.
Alderman O'Brien?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a wonderful opportunity to explain some of your services and everything, but I do have a question. This is open to citywide. Anybody within the school district can attend this if they come in and see you? And how would they basically do that if that is allowed?
Any program?
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's a good question. When I went back to those community-based programs, there are two programs that aren't necessarily they're community services but not open to the public per se, and that's the skill building, because that's Dr. Chris students, and then the food pantry that we or the Meals for Kids program that we do every Wednesday. It serves about 35 Dr. Chris families. I believe over 90% of them are ELL, and most of them are immigrants or refugees. We don't advertise that simply because, one, we don't know the volume that could come in, and two, the food that we're getting are from other local nonprofits. So it's the same food that's kind of being circulated, and they could be going elsewhere instead of, somewhere that's in that neighborhood. So other than that, they're more than welcome to walk right in or contact me. Anything that's advertised at the center is open to the public.
Follow up, Alderman O'Brien?
No, I have a question on a different subject, so I will yield. If you can come back, I'll let Alderman Wilshire with her question.
Alderman Wilshire?
Yeah, I had a question about the ELL that you're doing during the summer. Do you already have families and kids enrolled in that?
No, not yet. So I met with Bob Chapa and the ELL elementary school teachers. I think, I like talking to teachers and being on the ground. And so I wanted to pitch this idea to see if it would even work, or if there would be interest. Obviously, summer camp's expensive too. And so then you have students who not only don't have anything to do, but their English learning skills are not being utilized. And so they thought it was a great idea. We talked about getting kids that they knew would be home alone. So that's kind of the focus. Bless you. So we're still in the early development phases of that, but yeah, I think it'll, I'm looking forward to it.
It seems like that's a big need here in the city, the ELL. In the schools, it's a big problem. There's not enough teachers or
Right,
resources for that.
right.
So
And so,
thank you for that.
yeah, I mean, and again, that's what we're trying to do, is just, lessen the burden. And even if it was one ELL student, I think that's a success, so.
Thank you.
Alderman Tenza?
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. If someone wanted to help out, either financially or make a donation otherwise, what sorts of things can the center use so that you have enough? Is it cleaning supplies? Is it art supplies?
I'd say it's, I would say it's art supplies, or for the summer, allergy-friendly snacks. So, once they get off the bus, the teachers recommended that they get a snack, which is great. But things like goldfish and, yeah, any type of, I mean, we always take in-kind donations. We're not gonna turn that down. But for the summer, art supplies, maybe some outdoor, you know, whatever, and, snacks.
Thank you.
Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you. I yielded because got a fresh idea, but you say you do feed some of the students that come in, of people who have a need. And I know our, we do have Mr. Donovan sitting out there waiting to come in with the school department. And under that is the cafeteria service that is, you know, within the school. And I just wonder if it'd be worth to look into, you know, some of the meals that are, you know, delicious meals, I should say, that are
Sure.
prepared by school district to the students. Basically, I'll ask Mr. Donovan what happens to those, and could they be resealed and used in another venue? I hate to see good food thrown out. I don't know what the health department would say with this, but it might be the beginning of a good idea to look to maybe to get into that, and maybe something you could think about, you know?
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. We did just put flooring down in one of the basement rooms so that we could store all the food efficiently and up to code. Which, so, you know, I don't know if that's possible, but I think, you know, using resources and not being wasteful, is a great idea. So that's, our next step is to get a refrigerator, but it needs to be a certain type. So, but yeah.
NSF.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's a good idea. We could definitely look into that. Over the summer, I believe that we're going to be offering meals, or the center is going to be a site for the meals, summer kids, or summer meals for kids.
So just for the watching public, that it is a City of Nashua building. That's why the city picks up all the utilities and the maintenance of
Correct.
the building. And hopefully a lot of the maintenance that I saw the last time has been done for you. So.
Yeah, I think we're just getting. I think we're getting over the hump. The electrical was upgraded. You know, it's a fairly old building. I think that the heating was 27 years old, and then the computer lab didn't have heating or cooling, so that wall unit went in. So, I think in terms of the heating unit, we're just looking at something more cost effective in the long run, and then energy efficient that would obviously save money and align itself with the city's goals of being energy efficient. So,
Okay. Alderman O'Brien?
Along that vein, I'm sure you know, that was an old fire station, and the horses ran out of it. I think their names were Ash and Cinder, I don't know, but it is kind of historical, and I'm glad that your organization is in there
yeah,
doing something what the fire station did, providing a community service, and it suits the building well to continue in that vein.
yeah, it's a great space. It's you know, it's an old building, so that's been interesting. But yeah, I think you're right. I think to maintain the historical dignity and kind of community, continue that community services.
I think Alderman O'Brien opened that station.
No, I did not, but just for the public, I did work in your adjacent structure next year, and we stayed there longer than we should have. You know, I was kind of hoping when the toilet flushed and went where it was supposed to be, you know, if it went out of my sight, I didn't care. You know?
Yeah, I guess that's a good mentality to have.
When you're working for the city, it's sometimes, okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for coming in.
Great, thank
and
you.
sharing with us. The next item to be discussed is Department 191, the school department, revenues on page 54 and appropriations on page 261. And joining us is Mr. Donovan, who is the Chief Financial Officer of the school district.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question before we start.
Yes, Alderman Clements.
Was an invitation extended to any of the school board members this evening?
I assume
The
it
ones that
was.
just walked in?
Okay. Oh, good, okay. Thank you.
We like to answer questions in a timely manner.
I know, ask and you shall receive.
Seriously.
Perfect timing.
Good evening. If you just introduce yourselves for the watching public.
Superint- Superintendent Jamal Mosley.
Yeah, these you don't have to push. They're on live all the time.
Okay.
Oh, that's good. That's good to know. Board President Heather Raymond.
Okay.
And Daniel Donovan, Chief Operating Officer for the schools.
Just want to let you know today that on national news, I don't know if it's CNN or Fox, your program that you'll be debating next week is making national news.
Yes, they called me several times today.
Anyway, it's beside the budget. Do you want to give an overview before we start, and then we can go through the revenues and appropriations and specific questions?
Sure, we sent over like a small presentation.
You did.
I have it on a thumb drive if it's not, but
Thumb drive you bring up here. And then you can drive from over there. Or you can just move the keyboard and the mouse.
Oh, here. Sit down. They're completely not connected to anything.
so will it just?
Oh, well,
Oh,
I
you
don't
drive
have
from
that.
over there?
You drive from over there.
You can move it, it's,
I can drive.
Just move, that presentation's still up, so just close that.
Click on the.
There you go. Now close that.
Go ahead, Jen, you do it.
This is a test. And then you can open your file.
This is the most exciting TV on cable.
It's a test of computer knowledge.
yeah, that's the open, yeah.
Right there.
Good, how are you?
Removable disk key.
Yeah, no, that's the one right there.
Yep.
Oh, you got it right there?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go, okay. good.
Oh, dying.
There we go.
Well done.
You want to put it on the show, it's down in that. There you go. I'm sure you've done this before.
So this is our FY '20 budget for the school, National Public Schools. I'll start the presentation, and then Mr. Donovan will chime in, and then we'll answer questions after that. So basically, our budgets is built on. Go ahead, Dan. We presented it to the board this past, I'd say probably late winter, early spring. It was approved by our board. Our budget process is one that starts probably, I would say, in the fall, where we have all of our different departments and building principals coming in and making requests and prioritizing needs. I talked briefly about this probably about an hour ago through our work session around strategic planning. Our goal next year is to have a strategic plan for the community, but also to the aldermen, so that they know where our goals and objectives are for the district. Alderman Dow, I also mentioned you at our last meeting because I thought that it was a very good idea, and we do too. The collective, we thought it was a very good idea that you mentioned earlier around having not just a budget for the next year, but also a budget priorities. So not one that outlines a plan for the next 5 years. So rather than waiting for that December, for that, what we call the number, we call the number like the 2.4, the 2.5, or the 3 to come out, we would have that dialogue long before that. But more importantly, we would have that expectation in prior to the budget process even beginning. So that, I thought, was a very good suggestion. Our goal is to get the strategic plan completed, and then subsequently, we're going to put some budget numbers in terms of the accomplishment of those identified goals per year according to the budget. So we're going to definitely take your suggestion on that, and thank you for that. So
Also, you probably want to interface with Director Marchand. We've now funded the city master plan, and that ought to dovetail with your plan.
thank you. We'll certainly do that. So for this particular budget process, what we were looking for is the attraction and retention of educators. As I've heard have you heard me say many times, we have a burgeoning ELL population here in the city. Our staff has gone through many iterations of staff reductions, and we certainly want to retain that level of human capital investment that we have done over the years. We started full-day kindergarten 2 years ago. That was started with the understanding that there would be some paraprofessional support. Right now in the district, there are inconsistencies with that, in a sense that not all of our full-day kindergarten classrooms are what we call equitable. So we want to make sure there is at least like a 0.5 person in all of our full-day kindergarten classrooms. And also, part of what we, the district, have, it's very difficult to plan and budget, but we certainly want to make sure we get a handle on our correction of out-of-district budget shortfalls. This has been our Achilles heel for quite some time. It's plagued us in a way where we don't really know per se how many kids. We can always estimate, and we certainly use the mathematical pieces to this in terms of planning, but we don't know what kids are coming into our district. We are a district, we have a reputation. It's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing too, of making sure that all of our kids, special education 504, get what they need. And that reputation has made us a very attractive destination for Nashua parents and families, and also families from Massachusetts as well. So we have put some safeguards in place to think about that out-of-district cost. We've also put some what we call creative staffing on that, and certainly I can speak more to that later on in the presentation.
Okay, just to run down a few numbers here quickly. This slide is basically just describing the budget that we have now, and how it's broken out into a couple pieces. The Board of Education approved for the current school year 109 million. And in the book that you get from the accounting department and the mayor here, it's much higher number. It's 146 million. This just basically shows that Board of Ed approves the 109. The 37.7 million are the benefits, the FICA and the pension. And then the rest, these 400,000 just an accounting entry for contract reserves. So that's your 146 million that's in the current year's budget.
Just for the new members, the only money that they have to spend is the 109, or last year's budget. The other monies are kept within the city budget for benefits and also contract negotiations. When they negotiate their contract, then the money is transferred from contingency to them to cover the contract. The other thing, while I think of it, is I believe all the numbers in the budget book are the budget that you submitted to the mayor, and the mayor only made a entry cut at the bottom line. We basically can only make bottom line cuts. Whatever we decide is the amount of money we want to give to the school department has full discretion on how to spend it. Can make suggestions on line items, but they don't necessarily have to follow that. They will again make decisions on their budget in July when they get the budgets fully passed as to how they're going to spend it. So with that, I guess we can continue.
Yes, that's all correct. Now, the interesting thing, the budget that is in the book, in your budget book, your proposed budget, The budget that was approved by the Board of Aldermen, the Board of Education, excuse me, is less than what's in the book. Okay, so what's in the book is a 2.92% increase. The mayor then made his reduction of about 700,000, so that came down to a 2.25% increase. After the Board of Education spent the last, couple of months looking at that, some reductions were made to our budget, so that the budget that the Board of Education did approve is a 2.43% increase. So just doing a little bit of math here, that 109,354 from the previous slide, this year's budget, the budget that we're proposing, not counting the benefits, et cetera, is 112. That's a $2.660 million increase, 2.43%. The mayor suggested to us a 2.25% increase. This 2.43 is basically the 2.25 plus another $200,000 to hire 4 ELL teachers. Okay, so that's what makes up the 2.43. And then I just noted at the bottom of this slide, the budget increase this year is 39 million. The benefits and FICA pension increase, that number, as Alderman Dowd mentioned, is put into our budgets by the city, so you can see the cost per department in the city, but the reality is they are managed at this level. If they're under budgeted, it's not my problem, it's the city's problem. If it's over budgeted, I don't get to spend the money, it goes back into the city reserves.
Can I add something, Dan? Yeah,
Sure.
thank you. I just wanted to point out that
Just, every time you speak, could you just give your name?
oh, sorry, this is Heather.
Because the transcriber doesn't know who's.
Sorry, this is Heather Raymond, President of the Board of Education. In that percent increase, Mr. Donovan mentioned that $200,000 was on top of the 2.25 that the mayor had asked for. We did pass a motion pretty much binding ourselves to spending that $200,000 on ELL teachers only. And that is specifically to meet a need that the city has that we're unable to meet under the mayor's budgetary restrictions. And our ELL population has grown by 200% over the last 10 years. So we really need to give our ELL teachers some relief, and we need to be able to provide these services to our students. We have students who are coming here who need these services so that they're able to be productive in school and graduate in a reasonable amount of time.
So, just one thing, that the 200,000, he has it in contingency.
Yes.
And it's the mayor's understanding, although it could change with the Board of Aldermen, but that will be held in contingency till you actually make an offer on an ELL person.
That is my understanding as well, that we have met the mayor's proposed budget of 2.25.
Right.
And then the additional 200,000 that brings us up to 2.43 would be held in contingency, so that we all can make sure that we agree, that we follow through on our agreement to make sure that it is for ELL teachers and ELL teachers
Okay.
only.
And the other question I'll ask, do you want to answer questions as you go through this, or do you want to just answer them at the end?
Whatever you'd like.
All right, if anybody has a pressing question as we go through, raise your hand and I'll recognize you. So, if you're all set with any more slides, or?
Just
Okay,
two
go
more,
ahead.
two more.
Could I ask,
Alderman Jettie?
I'm already lost on here.
It's easy to get lost
Um,
in this book.
So when I look at the budget book, I think I'm looking at the bottom line on page 264.
50 million or so?
Yes?
Yes. So if you take that 112 and you add the 39 down at the bottom, then you'll
Yeah.
get to the 150.
Because in your
Okay.
budget book, the
Yep.
part that's retained by the city for the benefits, FICA, and pension is part of their budget in the budget book, but that 39 million sits in the city coffers and they spend it, not the school department.
Okay, thank you.
And I think the other point to mention is the increase that is suggested by a mayor each year is based on the 109 million, not on the 146 million. If they want to change that around, we'll be more than happy to take the 2.4 on the higher number, but
I'm sure. Alderman Tenza?
Thank you. And I just want to ask about the contingency and where that is in the budget. Is that in the school department's budget, or is that in some other contingency
It's,
fund?
when we get to the bottom line, it isn't still in the bottom line budget for the school department out of what the mayor took out. And it will be held at our level until they tell us they've got somebody hired for ELL, and then we'll release that money by a motion on the full board, I guess. Alderman Clemmons?
Well, yes, but it's in it's in the general contingency fund, I think is where it's located within the
Not yet. I don't think
budget.
it's been moved there yet. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's been moved there yet. It's still reflected
Okay.
in their budget, but I don't know whether they've moved it yet.
Oh, I see, yeah, yeah.
I think they want to wait and see what we do. Alderman Jettie?
So, yeah, thank you. So is the difference between what when I look at the budget book, the department request and the mayor's proposal, is the difference the 200,000 for the ELL teachers? And you've evidently made some agreement with the mayor that he's gonna put that money in a contingency fund to make sure that you spend it on the 200. So if you got the 200, that would, your request and his proposal are the same, or is there still a difference?
no, that would be fine. The budget in the budget book was a 2.92% increase. And that was because we were still working on the budget with the Board of Education. The Board of Education then reduced the budget to the 2.43. So the number you see in the book is a minus 700,000. 200,000 of that will be sort of managed by this contingency. The other 500,000 has effectively been reduced from our budget.
Okay, so,
Yeah, if you look at the education budget, you'll see in the bottom line, I get to that page. There's two entries, the mayor's adjustment of 729,300 negative
I'm sorry,
And then-
where is that?
on page 264,
Okay,
bottom line.
yep,
And then there's expense transfers to other funds, 350,637. Right now, I'm not sure where the 200K comes out of, but it's one of those two numbers.
It comes out of the 700.
Oh, thank you.
okay.
So, right, so we're asking that the mayor give us back 200 of the 700 that he has taken away. And we're asking that the 200 he gives back to us be specifically for ELL to meet that need for the community.
So his intent, and which he's asked us to do, but of course, depends on what the budget committee and the full board does, but was to approve that, but hold it in contingency until you come to us and say, we've hired an ELL teacher, this is what we're gonna pay him, and we release those funds to you.
Yes, that's what the mayor would like.
Alderman Tenza.
And just, I think I understand this now, for the edification of the members, page 271 in the budget book. In the contingency, the mayor has included $200,000 in education priorities.
Yes.
And so I guess the question I was asking before was that $200,000 already included in the budget, which the answer is yes, it is.
Yes,
And if we were to give this $200,000 just back to the school department, it wouldn't affect the bottom line of the budget?
no,
Okay,
well, it's already in the budget,
thank you.
okay?
Okay, so just a couple of things that we were able to, I would say, add to our budget. And again, I know everyone can read, so just for the public at home here. This year, we had our 21st Century Coordinator. We needed to transfer that line item from our,
From a special revenue fund.
from our special
To the
revenue
operating
fund to the
budget.
operation budget. We also added our school psychologists for our special education in-house programs. We had to add our teacher of the deaf programs that we have here. It's imperative that I just want to make a special note that by adding this teacher, it actually prevents the district from sending out of district costs. In other words, if we don't have the teacher here, we have to send our hard of hearing or deaf students out of district. Full day kindergarten, as we shared with you before, and I just want to be very clear, we need more paraprofessionals there to bring equity throughout the city. So what we came up with in terms of this is what we call the phase-in phase, so to speak, in the sense that we're phasing in 4 paraprofessionals next year. Our goal is actually to come back and phase in another 4 paraprofessionals. I did hear the conversation that this is the mayor that proposed this. If the if this alderman here or this group of people want to bestow an additional funding here for the schools, we're not opposed to that. We're very open, and we will not object in any way whatsoever. So if you find the goodwill in the heart, by all means, we'll take anything you decide to bestow on us. Grant writer, this year, I just want to be very clear that this is something that, thank you to the mayor and the alderman in the city. If you notice, it's about $35,000 in our budget, but it's going to be another $35,000 within the city, and it's a shared position with the city and with the schools. So we're very excited about that. Behavioral paraprofessionals for our special education programs. We in our central office and getting back to our ELL piece, we can do a better job communicating with our parents and our community members. And I'm not proud of this, but I want you to know the urgency of this is that we have one person at central office that is bilingual. And we're very, very vulnerable in a sense that we have parents coming in, registering kids, parents calling our central office, and depending on the day, there's no one there to help them, communicate to them, or whatsoever. The other piece that I want to rectify within the district is that we send out mass communication to our parents, whether it's a snow day, updates, and what have you. What we don't do is that we don't send it out in other languages and communicate and really bridge that communication gap with our bilingual parents, the same parents that the mayor and this the aldermen talk about with those ELL kids, those teachers that we're designating for them. What I mean by that is that we could do a better job with getting the word out with our parents, our community members, and I really want to make that focus for student engagement and parent engagement as well. And again, down below, we see the ELL for teachers that will put in contingency, and that it all comes together about 501, about $500,000 and some change. So that's kind of where we're at this point. Well,
Okay, just a couple of quick things. Some additional funding for the school department via grants and other things is reflected in the pink pages, special revenue. Also CTE funding, when we get tuition from out-of-town students in the CTE program, that money goes in to a special account that can only be spent to replace equipment. So the money's in the pink pages, they get to spend only but by resolution from us and the ability to spend that money on only that one reason it's in there for. There are a whole bunch of special revenue funds for different things around the city. The other thing, we have talked a number of times about the grant writer, and we've already gone through the other half of the grant writer. There's a lot of people that are excited about having the grant writer. And the one bilingual person that you talked about is now filling a more important role in central office and is a lot busier than she used to be. So
Yeah.
it's tough for her to.
we're very fortunate that we have, this individual, but she takes vacation. She's wearing multiple hats. She's very generous with her time and never says no, but that's not sustainable.
Right.
And that's
right.
not her job description isn't to be an interpreter for us. She has an actual job that she's supposed to be doing, and when she's called to interpret for students and families coming into central office. It's very nice of her to do so, but it takes her away from her daily responsibilities. And we're up to about 20% of our students that qualify for ELL services. So this is a very large chunk of our population, and we really need to improve the way that we service them.
Two quick things, the Manchester school system and Central, they have a number of languages, and for years, they've hired a service. When they talk to a parent, they talk through this third interpreting company, I guess, and does all the interpreting when they're trying to have those discussions. And the other thing that it would be nice to see, and I know it's probably not in your budget, but on your website, to have all the information that you put out on your website be in different languages, especially Spanish.
Sure.
I would very much like that.
Yeah, so that would be great. All right,
We are putting together a new website for next year. So at the end of fiscal year 20, we should have a new website up and running. We'll see what it looks like, but
Yeah.
all right. And non-labor right, Alderman Jettie?
Could, could you indulge me, could you go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
So were you telling us that these things are things that you've already added that are in the budget? They're not
yes.
things you're asking for,
No,
right?
these are all new,
The budget.
new personnel
Uh-huh.
in the budget.
Yep, that
They're
we-
already in the 2.43.
I think they're explaining what the additions were to their budget that they felt they actually required. That one first line, the transfer, there are times when not only the school department, but other departments get a grant and hire somebody. When the grant runs out, if they want to retain that person doing the same job, they have to bring it into their budget.
And she's a very important part of our school district.
Oh, I've heard
Um,
a lot of phone calls.
So yes, everything that you see listed there is in the 2.43. These are the things that we were able to add from last year and stay within the monies that the mayor had asked us to stay within. We would very much like to add more paras and more ELL teachers and more special education and actual psychologists, but that is very expensive.
Okay, follow up Alderman Jettie and then Alderman Kelly.
So when I look at that slide, am I reading that correctly? You're able to get 2 psychologist interns for 28,000, 4 kindergarten paraeducators for 62,000?
Ye-
Is that right?
Yes, yes. So interns are students who will be doing an internship with the school, and then we offer them a stipend while they're doing their internship. And with luck, next year we'll be able to then hire them if they are fantastic and we can increase our budget.
And the paras, they're,
Yes, that's sort of a starting salary for a para without benefits, keep in mind. That doesn't include benefits.
13,000?
About 15,
15.
15.5, yes.
Just, paras are probably one of the most underpaid groups in the city.
Absolutely.
I would, all the,
So I divide 62 by 4, I come up with 13,000. That's,
It's not very
No,
much. It's a
it's fif-
part-time position.
15 times 4
hourly.
is 60, right?
Yeah.
So 15 and 15.5 is your,
oh, okay.
Yep.
Well, I said,
All set?
I'm a mathematician.
Right. So, but to,
Divide by 3 or multiply by 33, but
to answer your question, we would love to pay them quite a bit more if we could.
if I can just speak
Yes.
to, if I can just
Lieutenant?
speak to the behavior paras educators, they're significantly underpaid.
Significantly.
And, it should be a significant more money than what we're currently contractually obligated to pay, because these are the most difficult positions in the district. They're dealing with kids that have significant social, emotional, and behavioral needs. And they're very difficult to find. They're very difficult to retain. And they put in a lot of work. And again, it speaks to the elephant in the room around our outer district placement. If we can't provide those types of services and support for our kids and put that in and make, I don't want to use the word spending money, I really want to use the word investment into our special education programs in terms of this conversation than the other alternatives out of district, and we don't want to do that because it is significantly more. But certainly, this is one step in the right direction, but there's certainly more that we can do in terms of compensation and also getting back to the point that this budget is built on retention of good faculty, and that includes our special education paraprofessionals.
Alderman Kelly?
Thank you. I have so many questions.
Go ahead.
Let's start with what actually you were just talking about, Dr. Mosley. In your summary, you talk about $6 million that we spent last year putting people out of district because of our inability to meet their skills. What's the number one reason? What things can we do? And I imagine you're going to look at this in your strategic plan, but what things can we do to bring that number down and keep those kids in Nashua?
I could start. This is the, kind of a moving target. Part of this has to do, and, I'm looking at Alderman Dowd because I know he's been very involved in the new construction project. And again, I'm going to kind of list out a couple of things that we can do to be proactive on this. Let's take our our middle school construction project. And one of the recommendations that we're getting from the architects and also coming from our educators is really building programs within our schools and programming for our schools. And that means that's space and that means it's faculty. So we have to make that investment. So if we can house our programs inside or in our district, it saves us. It's a cost saving piece to that. The other thing too is that when we send kids out of district, we're paying tuition and we're paying transportation. And so that's kind of a double-edged sword. The third part to this is that we can't control the tuition for our out-of-district placement. So we've gotten, 1 year it's $80,000 out of district. There's no regulations that say that they can only go up 5%, 7%. So we're at the will of the out-of-district placement. So some of our out-of-district placements have said, listen, we're telling you how much we're going up, and so that contributes to the cost of that. So I'd say providing program within our schools, providing programming around what our kids need, and certainly making those investments in our staff. The other thing too is like part of what we like to do, and we've talked about this too, and this is a discussion that can be a little bit controversial, is really that early intervention piece. You hear time and time again the social emotional growth of our kids, but that doesn't start at the high school. It doesn't start at the middle school. It really starts at first grade. It really starts with those early interventions, not just about academics, but it's also about the kids, getting them counseling, getting the services connected to our kids and our most high risk families at an early age.
I just want to also note that one of the things that impact our out-of-district cost is that there aren't a lot of options. It's not like we can cost compare and do some shopping for where these students can get their needs met. For a lot of them, there's one place, and there's one place that most of southern New Hampshire and most of north central Massachusetts sends their children to, because there just aren't a lot of resources out there for students with significant needs that we're not able to meet in the district. And we can meet some kids' needs when they're smaller, but as the children get older, it becomes more difficult when you have kids who aren't able to meet their own hygiene needs or their own feeding needs. There's only so much that we can do for a teenager in-house.
Follow-up?
Thank you. Do we know if we are on par with other districts, if we're extremely high compared to other districts in New Hampshire or southern New Hampshire?
The reaction I have to you is the district that compares to us is actually Manchester, and so they struggle with out of district cost as well. And so I was Dr. Vargas currently is the superintendent in Manchester, and an idea that we have and we're still going to explore is that perhaps creating a partnership to share some of that cost. Manchester and Nashua are pretty close, and so there's some preliminary, very, very early preliminary discussion on perhaps how do we share that cost? Is there a way that we can collaborate in a way to create programming that is either at a neutral site or at a site somewhere else? I don't really know at this point, but certainly understand that it's $6 million now. Last year, it was like 5.3. The following year, it was like 5. So this is something that continues to grow. I have no idea why people are doing this, but it's the truth. We've had people who actually, in Massachusetts, the special education in terms of aging out, is age 22. Here in New Hampshire, it's 21. And we said, there are families who have opted to stay in New Hampshire or Nashua because we do it so well, even though they can continue services in Mass for one more year. Don't ask me why, but that's the case. The other piece to this, and this is a curse and a blessing, I guess that's the word. We do things right. I mean, we are accountable. We really have a solid special education department in place. And I don't say that to brag or nothing like that, but when Chris Breen's retired, there was a transition plan in place. In this case, Masha Bagley got the position, or earned the position, excuse me. And we've had some consistency there in terms of placement for our kids, knowing our kids, developing individualized plan. In special ed, you never talk about services, we talk about needs first.
If
Just
I
to-
could
just to-
comment on that.
Sure.
I have had that exact experience, and it's been incredible for
Oh.
my family. So I do appreciate everyone in the district who works so hard to make that such an important experience and an experience that families can feel good about. So I thank you for that.
Okay, so, just one thing. Some students, at least during my reign in the Board of Ed for a number of years, the out-of-placement district for a single student was $200,000 a year.
Capped?
Hmm?
Capped is what you're saying?
One student
No.
for
One
out of
No.
district.
I mean, if you,
And the other thing that we talked about back then was trying to get a Southern New Hampshire coalition, not just Manchester.
Yeah.
But Hollis, Brookline, even Londonderry, Hudson, and approach the problem from a consolidation standpoint because it's a lot of money. And the smaller towns get hurt even more out of their budgets but it's very difficult to get that group together.
If I can I'm sorry.
Oh, can I defer for a minute to Alderman O'Brien? Then
I
Alderman
got a few
Tenz.
more.
My question is, talk about the paras again. You're right, they're the most underpaid. I'm married, I am married to a retired one, and she did it more as a labor of love than anything that you guys ever paid her, to tell you the truth. But I do know your hours with the preschool, and we have several preschool venues around the city. Yet, the paras who work in that type of education only work 4 days a week. And because they only work 4 days a week, they're part-time employees and receive no benefits, no medical or anything else. So wouldn't it entice you more to have these paras move up to a full-time status? Perhaps, I know it's a labor negotiation as well, so I'm planting seeds here, I'm doing my best farmering. But the thing is, maybe we gotta look out of the box with this one and maybe up them, so like a single mom or dad who wanted to become a para would, because right now, to be a part-time para, I mean, if you say full-time paras are underpaid, put yourself into a part-time para, you know what I mean, and look at that hours per week. And I know my wife, God bless her, she didn't do it for the money,
I agree with you.
yeah.
Alderman, I'll come back to you. Alderman Tenza and then Alderman Clements.
Thank you. We all know that part of the reason that Diane did it too was to get out of the house so she wasn't around Mike as much. So let's not
Write that down.
give her too much credit. But I just want to ask, last year, the state passed the kindergarten funding, and last year's budget, we didn't really know what to expect. We have revenues now. Can you just tell us, are the revenues kind of what was talked about during that campaign last year? And how the per student revenues for kindergarten compared to the state aid for other students?
Yes, I believe the estimate for the state was gonna be $1,100 per kindergarten, and that's, should be the amount to be received, so it's gonna be about $800,000. I believe that's in the revenue
It's
budget
in the
this year
revenues.
for the first time, so we are expecting about that much money.
And so the $1,100 though is much less than the $3,600 that we received for all other students?
Yes, yes. But that was because they're using the Keno money, I guess, so that was, now if Keno, they get more openings for Keno, more towns and cities, I think, are adding it, so maybe that 1,100 can increase over time.
All set.
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons?
Thank you. I just want to go back to a comment that that the superintendent made, and that's, retaining educators. My wife's an educator in a different district, and it seems that that it's par for the course there, to, once a teacher gets into their 5th year, to let them go. And reason being is that they don't have to offer them tenure. Do we do that here in Nashua? And what's your thought on that?
Unfortunately, thank you for the question, and I've said this publicly. If I can use this visual and analogy, I actually feel like we are the Kansas City Royals of teaching. And I share that with you because when we have a first year teacher coming in, we invest time, resources, professional development. And over the 5 year period, just at that 5 years, because our pay has been significantly low compared to some of our districts that border us, and that includes Massachusetts, because we are in competition with us. We're with them. They take our best teachers and I hate to use the word poach, but they sign them and they leave our district. And so when I put down retention, that's something I really meant about that. And I know recently we had a contract negotiation for 4 years, for a 4 year contract. The first year was retroactive, but still it doesn't quite align and make us competitive with some of our surrounding communities. That's for teaching, that's for the administrators. As you can see, we're paraprofessionals. And so that has plagued this district for so long. So the intent, to be honest with you and put my cards on the table, that we need to start, making those investments, but also making it financially unattractive for our teachers to leave us, because that has been a real issue for us. And even the faculty we have, they wear multiple hats, and because of the budget reductions that have occurred over the before my arrival, that took place, and some of it wasn't anyone's fault that's sitting in these chairs. For instance, I give you an example. We have some of our assistant principals at our elementary schools that are both assistant principals and content coordinators. Now, there's a lot of things that you can do. And not to say that they can't successfully multitask, but when you're dealing in schools that have significant needs, it's very difficult to focus on discipline and then switch and do a professional development on Lucy Calkins. So our real challenge in the district is really the retention and making sure our investments stay here, and more importantly, that we are competitive financially with other districts.
Follow up, Alderman Clemmons?
I appreciate that. And that I agree with you. I mean, that's just a fundamental of business. Is you invest in the employee, right? You want the employee to stay, and particularly when they're good employees. So it seems like Nashua has the opposite problem of the district compared to the district that my wife is working in, because they're pushing them out the door, whereas we're trying to keep them in. So it's a problem, but I guess it's a better problem to have than that. My other question is related to contract negotiations, is where are you with the custodians?
We remain at an impasse, I think.
But
This-
we're
in
fact-finding.
right now.
Oh, fact finding.
So what's, I know you can't go into too much detail there, but, this has been going on for 3 or 4 years now, that they haven't got a contract. Do you have money in the budget to give them a decent raise in a contract?
We have money in the budget, there's reserves from previous years, so. Yes.
I just want to qualify the response. Yes, we have money in the budget, but you use the adjective decent, and that's where the discussion continues.
Okay. I know that, from my perspective, it's been and again, I don't think some of what's going on there is the contention that is on the school board right now. So I'll leave that there. But, when I first got into the Board of Aldermen was 2008, and there were at the time I don't know, I think there was almost 16 outstanding labor contracts, and we managed to get them all done. And some of them had been going on for 3 or 4 years. So it's a black mark on the city when you see that almost 10 years ago, 10 or 11 years ago, we had that problem, and everybody else has moved on from there, and we still have this one union that has that issue. I mean, I really hope that it is a priority amongst the Board of Education and the administration to get these folks a good contract, because they deserve it. They work hard. They maintain our schools. Um, you know, they really deserve a contract, and I hope that we can see that happen.
And I think we agree wholeheartedly with that. And to speak for the board, I'd like to point out that in the year and a half that I've been on the board, we've done a teacher's contract, we've done a paraprofessional contract, we've done a director's contract, we've done a food service contract, we've done a secretary's contract. Did I say principals? And the principal's contract. But we can't seem to come to a custodian contract agreement. So, 6 out of 7 so far is not so bad. The paras come up again next year, and I think we're all on the same page and wanting to give them some relief. And that's been our perspective thus far. Last year, our budget was all about trying to improve the teachers and make sure that those contracts were, appropriate. This year, our budget is trying to improve staffing and services for our kids, and we have some reserve for the custodians. Next year, hopefully, we'll have the strategic plan and we'll align our budget with that. But we are sincerely trying to make sure that the staff in the district are supported, that they stay in Nashua. We like people who live here, who raise their kids here, who are part of our community.
Right. And just one additional thing, it's no longer tenure, it's continuing contract. That changed a while back. And it used to be 3 years, now it's 5 years, but you want to just explain what you can do in that time period and what you can't do after that time period?
Just
Relative to a new teacher that's here for the
they're
first 5 years, they're
right. So
at the will
they're.
of the city, right?
I'm sorry.
The employment at the will of the city.
Yes. So there's I hate to use the word non-tenure, but there's certainly there's no financial they're at the will of the city, or certainly they can be non-renewed based on that. Now I just want to just kind of back up and talk about the positives that have happened in the last 2 years. And I give a lot of credit to the individuals sitting here and also to the mayor as well. And we all have to acknowledge, and you've heard me, I've said it publicly, that prior to my arrival, and I use these analogies and these visuals, but I think it just kind of speaks to what was going on. Um, Anytime anytime we looked at our budget and there was a one before that, you're doing a reduction. And so what would happen in the district is that, is that there was a sense that whatever group came to the board was spared and whatever group was not spared. And so you kind of fast forward it here. The reason why we're in this situation with the ELL, and this is my perspective, you can disagree, is that those parents did not come to the board. They didn't come in and bring out their constituents and contact the board and what have you. And so, and along with other ones is too. So the squeaky wheel got the oil. And so that's why we do have these disparities in terms of programming and other areas within the district for our staffing. We also have to admit, because of that budget crisis that happened probably like 2007 or 2008, I can't remember the date on that, but
remember it.
as a result of that,
Nobody wants to remember
the
it.
district lost about 55.6 employees. And they say, well, the enrollment went down. Well, okay, I can hear that argument, but also the needs of the kids actually increased. We have kids with trauma. They have kids who, because of the drugs, the opioid addiction that's going on here in the district. So yes, we have less, but our kids need more. So we're trying to balance all that. We're trying to restore some of the things. You see that grant writer. We're trying to be creative in bringing some federal and state local funds. But at the same time, these are baby steps. So we hear it from the faculty, we hear it from the administrators, and you hear it from me. It's never enough. We need more. Of course we do. But we have to take prudent steps and be fiscally responsible in doing that. I could use a 3.7 for the next 10 years, to be honest with you. But it's going to take time and certainly some coordination. I heard Alderman Dow talk a little bit about like a partnership with surrounding districts around special education. And we've talked about that. In Mass, they have what's called collaboratives, and collaboratives are special education placements that are specific for kids that have or require out-of-district placement. And so just the two cities alone, Nashua and Manchester, can certainly actually significantly send enough students to fill up a collaborative. But here's the deal. You got to go out and purchase the land. You got to build the facility there. So in a sense, you may have to make a significant investment on the front end to really see it play out on the back end. Am I making sense on that? So those are the types of conversation. But once the back end starts to pay off, that $6 million that we're talking about now is probably 3 million or 2 million. But we all have to be cognizant and say, like, listen, if we're going to be sitting here a year from now, it might not be 7 million, but it's going to be 6.1 million or something like that. So we have to start thinking and having those conversations, and we already are on that path.
Alderman O'Brien?
Yes, I have a question of the chair. Are we allowed to question on individual items that are in this budget?
Yeah, you can question any of the line items just to get clarity, sure.
Okay, thank you. I believe in education as well as the sports and everything, and I see there was a reduction in game officials. Do we lose a team or something?
No, we didn't lose a team. That's just the athletic director tightening it up. Our athletic director used to be a math teacher. She's the best budget person that we have. She's probably almost as good as I am, I'd say.
I'm quite familiar, and I have to agree. Okay, so thank you for doing the due diligence with that. Okay, but I just really wanted to make sure that there was not follow-up, if I may, too.
Sure.
Okay, and looking at building grounds and maintenance, I see an increase from last year to this year, almost $30,000. Is there a particular problem or something?
Yeah, there's a number of pieces of equipment that are pretty much failed. When Mr. Smith puts a budget together, he he asks for a lot, let's put it that way.
Right.
So I have to work with him every year to say, okay, Sean, what do you really need? So this year, there's a number of pieces of equipment that are actually, they're not even working anymore.
All right.
So this is to get that equipment back.
So one thing along that same line, deferred maintenance.
Yes.
Back in the day, when I was on the board, the deferred maintenance was $1 million a year. Then it got chopped to 600. We still keep putting in for 600, but the mayor cut it to 100.
Yeah.
Right.
Did that last year too. We ended up having to bond some stuff because you just can't get through. You can't, if you don't fix it now, you know, you spend $1 now or you spend $100 in a year from now. So I think that's still at 100.
It's at 100 in this, in the fiscal year 20 budget. It
Yeah.
was in this year's budget. And as you mentioned, we did get 380,000 bonded,
Right.
which are covering projects that were in the 600,000 for this year.
Because they were long-term items, which.
Exactly.
And those long-term items probably should look to be packaged and bonded because they're 15, 20, 30 years. And we also had that $90,000 pump that had to be replaced, which
Yes.
is not cheap.
I do have one more line, if I may.
All right?
And that is janitorial supplies, looking at last year's compared to this year's $50,000 increase. That
No.
much of an increase in that?
No, that's a good question. What we did is the 50, in the budget presented in this book, that's the increase of all the supply accounts. We put them into one line,
Okay,
knowing
okay.
that that number was going to be reduced, which it was in our new budget. It's typically, you'll see an increase in electrical and plumbing and all the other supply lines. So it's not a 50,000 in the one line.
I was trying to find a 200,000 for you.
So in the grounds and maintenance, we have 18 schools. And I forget how many acres of lawns and trees, and I can tell you for a fact, working with Sean very closely on a number of things, that he has nowhere near the amount of money and time and personnel to maintain those things the way it should be maintained. So I have no problem with that increase whatsoever. The other thing I noticed in the budget was your utilities all stayed level. Now, I know we've made some inroads as far as electricity, and we'll make more with the person that we're hiring. But gas and all those other things are level funded?
We've been able to stay within those numbers the last 3 years. We've actually had savings. Those have helped me deal with the out-of-district problem that we've had.
That's the
So-
key, you know.
So
So
it's,
the-
I think it's a fair budget.
Yeah, in a minute, I'm gonna have you go to your last slide so we can get that out of the way. But the other thing is, over the course of the year, Mr. Donovan has to manage the school budget, and they move things around. It's not like a small department budget here in City Hall. There's a lot of moving parts, and they have to move and transfer funds to make sure everything works. So, that's how things work. Did I see Alderman Kelly?
So my question is around the 292 you originally had. Was that a result of just starting to get going, or were there some line items that really fell off when you went to the 243?
There were items that fell off when we went from 292 to 243.
Can you talk about them a little bit?
I could.
I can throw some things out there that I want.
We
That
took
were in
off-
there, yeah.
Yeah.
Paras, we took off some more ELL.
Yeah,
We took off an alternative behavioral program at the middle school. That would have been great. What else did we take off?
Just two things I noticed in reductions. One was in supplies, which like, and one concern I have, and I'm thinking of Alderman O'Brien used to talk to me about it forever, is school paper for the schools. Because a number of times parents are asked to send paper in for their teachers. So I hope that hasn't been cut, and you're gonna have to ask parents for paper, because that doesn't go over well with parents, trust me.
We have not cut any. The one thing about the educational supplies and miscellaneous supplies, those accounts are budgeted by the schools each year. So you have all schools budget them, they'll budget them slightly different each year. The total amount of money we allocate to each school has gone up, not down, but they may decide, oh, I want to spend money on some other item, and they'll put less in supplies. So even though that account will show year to year in total being up and down, for the most part, we're not, the same amount of money's available, they're just spending it in a different way.
Okay. And the other item I noticed is the line item for books went down now. I'd like to think that it's because we're going digital, but can you just elaborate on that?
We are going digital in a number of ways. World Languages came and made a wonderful presentation to us about how they didn't actually want any more books except for one particular, except for Latin, because Latin is pretty static. But they really like having online and dynamic resources that they can use. Having said that, I would love like $1 million to get Chromebooks for all of our kids so that they don't have to share when using online resources.
I'll give you a number for Bill Gates.
Yeah, I know, right? I told them the other day in a meeting that if I ever win the lottery, I will donate some back to the school. But a lot of our resources are now going to online. I just participated in a middle school science pilot review, and a lot of those resources are available online, which the kids have loved when they've piloted it. So. And I like because it gives us the most up-to-date information. We're not, in that case, using things that are 10 or 15 years out of date. We're using the newest version that came out this year.
And part of going online too, what's really nice about it is that when textbooks, that's the book. With the online version, you get the updates right there, so the additions are constantly fluid. And I don't want to get into politics or nothing like that, but every year we have local and federal elections. With the online version of that, all of that's instantaneously updated right after the inauguration. Whereas the textbook, I don't know, congressman from California in 1990, I'm sorry, maybe 2017, and then there's an election coming up. That information is already updated for our kids. Can I just say, I have 2 high school kids and I have a middle school kids within the district, and we talk. I am most comfortable using a computer, preferably a laptop. That's what my comfort level is. I see some laptops up here. Note that kids are most comfortable writing a paper using this, and responding to this, reading a book from this. So I sound like I think of that Norman Rockwell picture of the kid who's got the light on, he's studying, he's got the highlighter, maybe not highlighter, but he's reading the book and annotating it. Most of our kids now are engaging the curriculum through their phones, through online resources that are continue to evolve as we grow into a more technically savvy world. We do have kids again who require a textbook, who are who need special accommodations, and we're happy to do that. But certainly the online feature is becoming more popular and more frequent for our kids now more than ever.
Alderman Kelly?
Just a question around that. Do we foresee the ability to help children who can't see as well or translate in different languages by shifting to online?
Yes, so I participated in the middle school pilot this week. They have been piloting a number of resources for aligning our curriculum with next gen science standards. And so I was able to participate as the teachers met and reviewed, and we got to play around on some of them. And some of the online options have all of the materials in multiple languages. Some of them have it so that you can actually have a read to me function. And the teachers were saying that the students really enjoyed that, having them to be able to reach them. Just your regular ed students, not ones that need the special accommodation. So our teachers are, when they're piloting resources, looking into making sure that we have some diversity in what's being presented to us. And that includes diversity in whether or not they can print things out or have students access it on the computer, because some students don't do as well typing responses as they might with something printed out, or vice versa. So I was really impressed with how dynamic our teachers are when responding to the various need levels in their classrooms. I'm just blown away every time I visit or every time I'm a part of something like this. So
Can we let him do his last slide? So I think it's your last slide, right?
sorry, I
Just
talk
let
a
him finish
lot.
that, and then we can go on.
What, is he gonna leave?
No, 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 I just, it might answer some of the questions that might be coming up. Next slide.
Okay, the last slide, these items are in the budget. Basically, they're just 3 items equal $1.1 million. The good thing about these items is we're not going to be adding these same amounts each year. The 218,000 that we're talking about here, those are 2 significant hardware pieces for our IT department. The core switch is the switch that all our servers are on. It's the main switch for the whole district. If it were to go down, it would be a disaster. It's 16 years old. We've kind of gotten everything we can out of it. It's not worth risking anymore. So that's a significant portion of that 218. And the other is a wireless controller. As you've heard, more and more of the schools, you'll see each year around this time of year, the schools, if they have some extra supply money, they go out and they buy more Chromebooks. They're trying to get more and more Chromebooks in. They're using those as teaching tools. And to have those to work in a classroom, you need the wireless access. So the current wireless controller we have is maxed out. So we have to add another wireless controller that will obviously be better technologically, but will also allow us to add more Chromebooks.
Can I speak? I
Sure.
just want to add that the wireless controller is a very interesting dynamic. And if I could just, if we have to just, I want to picture this. 16 years ago, it is likely that we had one computer that hooks up. But I'm just sitting here now and I don't have my computer. But understand that most of our kids now have a cell phone, that the cell phone just doesn't connect. This is actually a small computer. I'll do you one better. Most kids have some type of other electronic device on them as well. In this case, I have, an iWatch on me or something like that. And so understand that sometimes people say, "Oh, well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5 access points." That's not what's happening here. If you think about it, it's more like you said you can only multiply by 3. Is that correct? You said 3, right? Okay, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 15 when you're looking at wireless connections. You're really looking at 15 access points. And so keeping that in mind, again, it's likely, and I'm not a betting man, but we can only assume that most kids are going to have multiple devices on them within the next 3 to 5 years. So think about when we have kids at the high school, about 2,000 kids, and I'm talking kids, I'm talking about adults. The adults also might have 3 to 5 devices on themselves. I'll include you too. I'm sorry, you're kind of over there by yourself. But understand that, when we talk and say we need like access point for, I'm just making up a number, but you get my point, about 7 to 8,000 connections, you're going to say, wait a minute, there's only 2,000 kids, 2,500, 500 adults. Why do you need all of that? But understand that each of these individuals have multiple connections, and again, good and bad, the days of going from pen and paper, it's likely that I'm going to send you an email, then write you a letter and mail it to you, and you're going to open it up and write a response back. So that's the type of what I call the evolution of our technology, and we continue to go through these iterations as technology improves and become more affordable and accessible for our kids and families.
Alderman Jettie.
So you actually read my mind. It was good of you to make him go to this slide, because the information technology was exactly what I wanted to ask about. When you talk about students, instead of using books, using laptops or iPhones or Androids or whatever, some type of a handheld device. I mean, when I went to school, everybody had a pen and a pad of paper, and it may have been, some kid may have had a Bic, and another kid had a Palmer, whatever. But basically, they were on equal footing. So what about, I mean, who provides these handheld devices? Is it the parents? Or, and are we treating, do all our kids have an equal shot at a good education if they're relying upon, if you're not buying the books, if you're saying we're gonna rely upon the computer devices, does everybody have a computer device? Do we provide them? Can they take them home? So,
So that's a very good question, and I would say that we're equalizing the playing field. And I say equalizing because it's not always equal. So we're talking about equity. Equity. So, for instance, it's not financially feasible or sustainable to offer one-to-one device at any level. It just isn't economically feasible. What we do have is computer carts, and so during the time that our kids are in the schools, they do have access to computer cards, depending whether they want to use that level of or that interface for technology. We could always use more. That's our part of equalizing that. Well, again, going back to some previous slides, we try to phase that in for our students that do need that. We also, I know that she was here today, and Megan from the Arlington Community Center, that we talked about developing some open computer time for our kids, particularly in the Dr. Chris area or community, where they can go to the Arlington Community Center. They can go to the library. We've done some partnership with those organizations. I'm just going off the top of my head, but at any rate, there's opportunity for our kids to go to those facilities to access and have computer connectivity and that respect. Individual students and finances varies, but what I have found in my observation is that we would be surprised how many kids have cell phones as they start to be a lot more inexpensive. So most kids that have cell phones sometimes have the cell phone capacity. They have a cell phone, but they might not have the data plan. And so even if you don't have the data plan, I want to go back to the wireless piece. They can, even though you might not have a data plan, you can still connect to our network so that that's a equalizer as well. Was I making sense? Am I making sense about that?
I understand. If I could,
Alderman Jettie?
I understand what you're saying,
Okay.
but it seems to me that there's a glaring inequity here, because you're talking about kids having access to these devices at the school building, using the wireless service at the school building, when the other kid, goes home and has, three or four different Apple products and
Sure.
wireless service at home, and he has an advantage. He or she can go home and do a lot of this work, whereas the other kid can only do it at the school or at the library, I suppose. But
I think that's true as far as accessing things online at home. There is there is inequity in our community. There just is. You know, almost half of our kids are on free and reduced lunch, and those aren't kids who have, multiple internet devices at home. Having said that, our teachers are aware of this, and all of the digital programming that we are utilizing has a printable component, so that teachers are utilizing that, printing things out, and making sure that if there's an assignment for at home, that it is something where it is a printable assignment that students can take with them. They're not expecting kids to be able to access things on their own. At the high school level, I think there is an expectation, like if you have a paper, but the students are typically given enough time that they can manage their time to get to the library during e-block or some other time. But yes, there is an extra burden on families who don't have the internet capacity that other families do. I would love to see our community work on that.
Follow-up, Alderman Jennings?
Please, thank you. I don't mean to get involved in trying to run the schools. I acknowledge that I wouldn't be able to do that. But is there a program where kids could choose to stay at the school rather than go home when the school bell rings? Can they stay at the school, take advantage of the computer and the wireless at the school? And then is there a bus service that then picks up those kids?
Oh,
and
yes. So
can bring
at the
them
high
home?
school level, there's a late bus for that exact purpose.
Okay.
At the middle school, there's a late bus for that purpose. And at the elementary schools, it depends on the school, but they all have programs. They either have a homework club or we have the 21st century program in a lot of our schools. The 21st century program is nice because it has teachers who spend time there helping with homework. And then we have homework clubs at some of the schools where teachers or volunteers stay after school specifically to help kids who need it. Our staff does a wonderful job of trying to make sure that all of our kids have access to the resources that they need to get a quality education. And our staff go above and beyond spending extra time. I'm so impressed with all of the efforts that people are making.
Thank you.
Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you. Your comments with the students who are on a discounted or free lunch programs, beautiful segue for my question. Mr. Donovan was here earlier when we had the presentation from the Arlington Street Community Center, and looking adjacent in the same property as the Dr. Chris School. And she stated that they give, through the community, some lunches and stuff like that, which got me thinking, what happens to all those wonderful sloppy joes and tater tots that get made in the school district? And do they get thrown out? And can they not be taken and repurposed? Now, I don't know if this is a federal, because I imagine some
I
of
don't
that
know.
money comes through or something like that. But, I'm just thinking, I hate to see something as wasteful when it can go to a student or family, in need, something like that.
We-
If it's already prepared.
There was I think it was online somewhere, some school districts are doing that. So there was where they were taking the extra food that they had each, and they were packaging it and then sending it home with children. So I actually sent that to our food service director,
Oh, good.
and we talked about it. The reality is, we don't have as much extra as you think. We do a pretty good job at making enough for the students that day, that each kitchen kind of knows how many kids they're gonna have each day. Is there a little bit of a federal component thing? Yes. Is there a little Board of Public Health thing? Yes. But we are looking at it to say, okay, if there is extra food, let's say towards the end of the year, that we're not gonna be able to use, especially that we get from the government, then maybe we're working with some of the other suppliers of food within the city to make the best use of that.
Follow-up?
And thank you for that, because every once in a while I come up with a wicked neat idea, and this is one of them. But
Wicked.
if you're gonna look into it, that's satisfactory, because again, I consider it wasteful, and I could see them being prudent, only making as much for the population and for the school that day. But, if there is some extra, I'm just thinking it could be repurposed, and there is the need, so I just.
And one of the other things, since you brought that up, that we're working on is getting, especially at the high school level, sort of a table that keeps things cold. A lot of kids, when you get the free and reduced lunch, you're supposed to take certain components. Some kids won't eat all the components, so they throw them away. So we're trying to say, okay, we'll have this table where, let's say, the piece of fruit or something will be put on the tray, and then it can be repurposed. So we're looking into some things like that.
Outstanding, thank you.
You got some good ideas you can bring to Concord.
Yeah.
Alderman Kelly, then Alderman Wilshire.
He actually addressed that.
Okay.
I was gonna talk a little bit about.
Alderman Wilshire?
But sounds like you got a good answer.
Yeah, well, actually, he did mention some of the things that I was concerned about. First of all, the USDA school nutrition program, your lunches and yeah, there are federal things. Also, health department, those meals have to be kept at certain, well, you know all that. You answered everything anyway, but I'm glad you're aware of that.
Just one thing on your slide here, I just wanted to mention on the out-of-district tuition. In this year's budget, you get $5.7 million for out-of-district tuition, including that 800K.
Yes.
A lot of money.
Yes.
Exactly. And we do, since this has been such an issue and we saw a large jump in this about 4 years ago, so basically I've been struggling to, balance the budget, so to speak, or not overspend. It's been between 600,000 and $1 million the last 3 years over what the budget has been. That's a big chunk of money. There's no one line in our budget where we're gonna get that kind of savings. So this number gets us close, but as you said, it's only to 5.7. The projection for this year is closer to 6 million. So this gets us close. Next year, it might be another 500,000 or something. But as we've mentioned, the difficulty with the out-of-district is those schools they don't have a mayor that says, keep it at 2.5% increase. If they want to increase 8%, and the state says fine, then they're increased 8%. And, they do provide a lot of good services to our students, a lot of these in a lot of need, but the prices in this area go up a lot more than our typical increase in our budget. So each year, it's taking a little bit more from the school budget to pay for out-of-district.
Just on the last line too, plan operation increases. Every department that's come in here has said that their maintenance costs are going up at least 15% due to material costs. So I don't see a problem with that. Alderman O'Brien?
Yeah, you bring up a good point, somewhat familiar with this, because I'm sure special needs students have the parents or their own particular advocate that can come up and really be strong a district for a child with that particular special. But if Nashua is offering the program, could a solution be with state law that you have to go with the municipality first versus going to outsourcing?
No, when you're dealing with special, to give you the abbreviated version, it's a team effort. We may make one recommendation to one program. The parents might disagree. Then it goes to arbitration. Then it can be settled through mediation. Either way, you're involved in some type of legal piece to this, where C. Bolton has been involved in this before, and certainly they got their person, and then they come to a settlement and arbitrate. An arbitrator might say, "Listen, we agree with the parents, and this is what it's going to be." And so we try to come to a mutual understanding, but it really has to be with a team effort. And sometimes it works the other way. Sometimes we make the recommendation for the student to be outside place, but the parents want them in the district, and that in itself can cause a stress on the district because of the needs of the student don't reflect the programming within the district. The other piece of this, and just kind of what my scenario that I shared with you earlier, let's just say for the sake of discussion, it's like if you think about over the last 4 years, if it's at, and I use the word lowballing it, let's say for the sake of discussion, let's say it's $5 million we've spent each year for out-of-district placement. That's 5 years at 4 million. That's $20 million that we have spent for kids to attend somewhere else, to pay some other staff member, some other community to keep the lights on, some other place to pay the taxes, some other place for that to keep employment and what have you. And understand when I talked a little bit about, and Alderman Dow alluded to it, around the collaborative. So if we were to partner with a collaborative and invest that $20 million, think about it. I know it sounds interesting now, but on the back end of that, that's an investment where we will recuperate that over time. So that's the type of, I hate to use the word out of the box thinking. I like to create circles, but that's the type of proposal that we are thinking and should be ruminating about as we start to address this this concern that has plagued the district for a number of years now.
So to get something like that in place, you probably need a good business plan to sell it.
Yes, and partners, as you alluded to.
And just to that point too, I mean, it's an idea we've discussed, but the reality of it, once a student goes out of district, they don't come back. So even if we did something like this, unless we could convince some existing students to come back, the, the savings would take a significant amount of time. So it's a real challenge. So putting the whole thing together would be quite difficult, but
Okay. Alderman Kelly, Alderman Schmidt, and then Alderman Clemmons.
Question about that actually. So if a student goes out of district, does that money leave the district from the state level as well? So if I live in Nashua and I decide I have to go to Manchester for a school for the blind, does that money now go to Manchester?
if they're in a, there are student, if they're at one of the private schools, if they go to a Manchester public school, then yes, we'd lose it. But if they're our student at another entity, they're still our student, so we wouldn't lose the money.
Okay. And do you know how much of that, how much of our, I guess my question that I was going to ask anyways was how much of the information do we have around where they're going, what their needs are, private, public? Do we have that so we can look at it? And it sounds like it's a bigger problem that needs to be looked at, and I'm sure you've started way more than I have.
Yeah, there's a lot of information in our budget book. I could get it to you. I could share it with this committee. And there's a lot of other information that the special ed department can put together.
Okay.
Yeah, their budget book is about twice the size of ours, and it's only for their one department.
Bedtime reading.
Fortunately, this year I got everything soft copy, so I don't have a whole living room full of paper.
Thank you.
Alderman Schmidt?
It seems to me if everything works out well, a grant writer would be a real benefit to that idea. Really. Money could be made available, not necessarily from our school budgets, but there's money out there that. I did have one more question too. Can you talk a little bit about transportation services? Oh, maybe I shouldn't have asked.
No, that's, transportation, most of our transportation, we have a contract with First Student. They keep the buses right down off Burke Street, down by the river. They provide all the in-city busing, the special ed buses and the larger buses. And then that's increasing 3%.
Yeah.
Actually bringing the new contract forward next week to our board. That's the lowest increase we've had in the last 5 years. We've been averaging about 4.5% increase. The challenge that they are having is it's hard to find drivers. The economy's good, people have other options. It takes probably 2 to 3 months for a driver to be trained, pass the tests, and then be able to drive for us. And the other piece of the transportation there are some other companies that get the vans, and they'll bring the kids to the out-of-district schools, and they'll also deal with some of the homeless children we have, bringing them back and forth. Even that, where you don't require a significant amount of training to drive the bus, you do need to get a special license from the state. They're having a hard time with that. So that in itself is getting more and more challenging.
Follow up?
Follow up, Alderman Schmidt?
In the state, up in Concord, we're talking about finding a way for bus drivers to extend their unemployment over the summer so that it won't be so disastrous for them to be out of work from the time school ends till it begins.
Now, didn't you do that last year?
It didn't take last year. We're working on it again. That might help ease
Another
your
thing that
burden
would help us,
a little.
if
Yeah.
you can, there's the way the state requires rostering, so that you're rostered to work, to drive a bus for the city of Nashua, but you then have to roster if you want to drive a bus for Merrimack. And it would be great if you could just be rostered to drive a bus in New Hampshire and not have to be rostered in every single
Brilliant idea. yeah.
Yes. So if something could happen up there with that, that would benefit us significantly. If some of the other towns had extra drivers on any given day, we could share that pool of people.
Great, thank you.
Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, to continue that, have we looked into what it would cost the city to have our own fleet and make that?
Back about 6 years ago, when we went out for the new contract, we only got 2 bids. We did look into that. That would require the initial purchase of the buses. That's your big cost. I
And the
think
maintenance going forward.
the maintenance going forward, et cetera, right, finding could we use some of the existing staff we have at Public Works or something, I don't know, but it's coming up with that initial cost. I think a bus now costs about $400,000. So we have about 88 buses that we use daily, and we have a pool of about 100 buses. So,
So the cost savings wouldn't be there?
not in the short term. No.
Okay.
We sort of looked at it, but it was that capital investment that probably wasn't, you weren't gonna save a lot of money.
Right, no.
Huge investment.
If I could,
Follow up?
yeah, so, getting back to where we were before on the idea of a collaborative, and I know it's like in an infant stage or whatever, or maybe if it's just even a thought, but my question on that is I gotta imagine that these out-of-district placements are very specific. So what, like in the scenario of a collaborative, what would happen, I guess, if, like, are there general services that the city of Nashua doesn't offer, but if the city of Nashua did offer them, there would be a savings? Do you know what I'm saying? Because like I can picture us investing all this money into some place and then still having to spend $3 or $4 million a year anyway, because the collaborative doesn't offer what's needed. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know.
If I can, this is going to come up again when we start to do the middle school construction project. And I like to talk in broad, but just to kind of give you an example. Like, for instance, we have students who are medically fragile. And so part of it is that if you were to enroll them in a traditional middle school, that can present so many challenges. And again, I'm sensitive to parents who might be watching this or anything like that, but they can, um, and you just don't, you need more than just a traditional bathroom. You need a changing station. You need it to be larger. Kids in wheelchairs need a larger facility in terms of just general space. Adaptive PE, which, you have to be able to house and facilitate that level of instruction. Physical therapy. You have to have a ample space to conduct that. You have to have staffing for that. You have to have equipment for that. Not the typical equipment that we have in our current PE classes. And the other thing too, for some of our kids, particularly with significant special needs, and I don't have it at the top of my head, but some type of therapeutic relief center. And I'm thinking around like aquatic pools in Massachusetts, where I worked. There was a partnership with a collaborative a South Coast Collaborative, where there was aquatic facilities that we'd take the kids every day on a bus, and it broke up the day. It allowed them to get some form of exercise. When you're in a wheelchair all day, you're again. I'm not a doctor, nothing, but there's a sense of, is it atrophy? Am I correct on that? And that type of exercise helps in terms of well-being and mindfulness. It helps the health of the student, and certainly those are the types of things we don't offer at any of our middle schools. In fact, we don't actually have any pools in our schools right now, and so that may benefit our kids. I'm not saying I'm advocating, but if you want to say a pool for our middle schools, I think it'd be great. But that type of what I call space is relevant at our middle schools, when you have a classroom of wheelchairs, students who are in wheelchairs, you actually need a classroom about this size for about 6 or 7 kids. And that's just for the kids. Some of our kids require sometimes 2 to 3 adults. So the place gets very cramped quite quickly. I mean, not quickly, but yeah, quickly. But you also need, a refrigerator there. You need just so many different things for the kids. I hope I answered your question.
Sort of. No, right, and I understand that, and I get that. I guess so yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. It's more or less a question of I guess for the majority of kids, what you're saying is that we could provide an environment like that,
And
but there might be some hard cases where we're
sure,
still going to have to go
I
out of district.
Yes.
ideally, 10 years forward,
Yeah.
let's say we have 5 kids eligible for that program, but we have relationships in Hollis and Brookline and other where they can actually tuition in those kids to fill those slots. And there's a sense of, that is a potential to cost neutral pieces to that if we do it right. This isn't to go with Dan's example, and this isn't like one and done. This is slow. Who said the word seed? Like planting seeds or farming. I think Alderman O'Brien said farming a little bit. This is a long term toy. Like we're gonna go out in some fallow land. Is that the word? I'm looking like fallow. It's uncharted. We're gonna clear the land. Tow. What's the word? I guess till. With our mules and move it around, and then take the tree stumps out and slowly plant those. I'm not going to use the word corn. I'm going to use the word maize, right? Can I get away with that? Put some maize down and slowly start to grow. I lived in Vermont, so I actually know this stuff, and then you cover it with that smelly stuff and then it grows.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I got a couple. You currently, before this year, I believe you have, or maybe it's with the 4 additional, you have 44 ELL teachers in the district? Trust me, it's in the budget.
Yeah.
How many students, ELL students do you have?
We always give it.
I have that,
1,100,
I think it's
it's
like 1,200.
I think it's 1,200. It's about 20% of our students qualify for ELO.
And if you do the math, that's how many students per?
It depends, so the,
It's in the school.
right, it depends on the school. So our ELO students aren't like evenly distributed throughout the city. It's just not how it works out. We don't tell people, well, you can only buy a house in this neighborhood because this school is filled up with ELO students. We need you to go over here. So it depends on the school. I think that the ELL teacher down at Bicentennial is up to like 75 students. But the ELL teacher at Birch Hill has 50 or 47 or something. So it depends on the school, how many students. Both of those numbers are too high. You can't service that many students.
Middle school and fairgrounds had huge numbers. as
Huge
well.
numbers. But then you might have a smaller number at, Broad Street, just because of the demographics of that local neighborhood. So each school's a little bit different. But honestly, we could use a dozen more ELL teachers easily, but we're trying to be fiscally responsible.
Can I just add a little caveat to that? It's not so much the number, you also have to look at what we call levels of entry. And so you may have 20 I'm just making this number up, so don't quote me on it. You may have 20 ELL students in a second grade classroom, but they, in terms of their readiness to be fully immersed, they may be on the back end of that and be transitioning out of ELL. So that number 20 is saying, wow, that's a lot, that's a high number. but it all depends on their readiness and acquisition of language. You can have 15 ELL kids who have no English proficiency whatsoever. And so the level of needs for those students is a lot more intense than the 20 that I mentioned. And so, and again, this ELL thing is very, very fluid because we cannot control who comes in and out. So part of what, and it all depends on level of readiness too.
Mhm.
It's a lot more advantageous for the student to be a second grade ELL student than it is to be a junior ELL student that comes over from a different country. The other piece that we deal with, there's some cultural pieces to this, and it is what it is. Our concept of schools is sometimes very different than other countries. In other words, sometimes in other countries, they go to school for a couple months, take a month off, come back, and then, take 2 weeks. And I'm not placing judgment, but we're pretty strict on 180 days. So we have students that said, yes, I've been in school for 5 years, but our 5 years or our definition of 5 years of schooling is very, very different in other countries. And that's negative. So, it's all dependent on levels of readiness. We use the WIDA test to evaluate the level of whether they can exit as ELL students or be continuing to be monitored. The other piece to this is that some of our, and I'm not judging, but yeah, I'm not judging. Don't say but, because then it means you're judging. I'm not judging or evaluating, but we're not judging or evaluated. However, we do have parents who opt out of ELL services, even though their child qualifies for ELL. So all of these dynamics are very, very fluid, and depending on what happens in the world, we tend to get an influx of ELL students at times.
So there are a number of people in Nashua that don't have a concept of what ELL means. They say, how can you possibly have enough teachers to speak 14 different languages? They don't understand how the ELL functions. So that's been a catching point with people saying, not
So-
only shouldn't you hire new ELL teachers, you should fire the ones you've got because they don't understand.
Right. So,
Yeah, no.
I mean, our ELL instructors are facilitators. They're facilitating these students' acquisition of English. They're also doing a lot of facilitating these students' acquisition of um, a broad general base of knowledge about how life works here. If we look at some of our refugee population, we have students who, not even that they don't know how to use a computer, some of them have never sat down in a chair and a desk before. So kind of imagine never having seen a chair and a desk or a pencil and a piece of paper, and now you're expected to sit there for 6 hours of your day and you don't speak English. So they really need someone to facilitate understanding about how the day is supposed to work and acquiring English language while also somehow trying to acquire academic knowledge to stay with or catch up to their peers. And this becomes more and more challenging the older students get. It's less challenging for a first or second grader than it would be for someone who's 14 or 15 and trying to do this in high school. So,
I think Alderman Tenza, then Alderman Clemens.
Thank you. And just to go, to touch on this, the point of the ELL teachers, to me, in a lot of ways, this is not like a new problem in our country. The country has had waves of immigrants who come at various times, who need to learn the language, who need to be taught about how to survive and how to get by. And I think that there are even some school systems which embrace this and start dual language programs for students who are, may speak Spanish and English and teach in both languages. Certainly investing in this type of curriculum, this type of programming for our students is only going to help our community, help these students, help them assimilate into our community. Can I ask just, it seems like you're basing the ELL teachers at about $50,000 per year based on $200,000 for 4 of them?
mhm.
Yes.
Okay, so if the board were to add more ELL teachers, we would use that number, the $50,000.
That would be fine, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Alderman Clemens.
Yes, I'm curious, Dr. Mosley, you were in Massachusetts for a while, correct, in your career?
Yes.
So my wife, interestingly enough, was also a teacher in Massachusetts at one point, is now in New Hampshire. Um, English language learning down there is done a lot differently than it is in like New Hampshire. Can you explain those differences and
Sure, sure.
It's a different
what
language
your
altogether, I believe.
Well, I didn't say wicked. Someone said wicked here. All right, that's a mass thing. Um, so a couple of things. That's part of what's happening here in New Hampshire, and it's happening. I think you said someone said nationwide. Is that our communities are becoming much more diverse than they ever have before. And I think, and Bob Chopa knows the number. I think we have about 63 different languages here spoken in Nashua. And so I think the difference between what's going on in New Hampshire and in Mass is that New Hampshire, in terms of the cities and the metropolitan pieces, you really have just Nashua and Manchester. In Mass, since we're talking Mass, we have Worcester, or the people watching this, I know it's called Worcester. By the way, I worked in Worcester. You have Cambridge, you have Boston, you have Springfield, you have Holyoke, you have Springfield, Holyoke. I think I'm missing one more. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm embarrassed. Sorry, my hometown, Brockton. And so, just those 6 cities, they have a large ELL population, more than in some cases the city of Nashua. Part of what's happening there is that they have whole divisions of individuals. Like, for instance, in my hometown in Brockton, my twin brother's wife is actually in charge of like one sector of the city, and Brockton's broken up into 4 sections. And that has been helpful in terms of monitoring. What's also different here in New Hampshire than in Massachusetts is because there was a court case in Mass where they used to call it bilingual education. Uh, there was a lawsuit, and those ELL kids were not being serviced uh, properly according to the law. The long and the short of it, in Mass, in order for you to be recertified, you have to take a sheltered immersion program as part of your certification, along with a special education class. It's just mandatory. And so the state made that mandatory for anyone who was looking to be recertified in any way. So I think we're at the precipice of having those discussions. I know the state, we are the few communities in Nashua that actually uh, um, are faced with this challenge. The other thing I think that's going on in Mass is that, and I'm concerned about this, is just the nuances of language. For instance, if I said, I'm feeling pretty bad today, you're looking at me saying, I'm feeling pretty confident, right? But the word bad can be used in so many different ways than what is used in other languages. Let me give you another example. I was talking and I had a nice conversation with the outgoing superintendent of Manchester, Dr. Vargas, and he is an ELL student at one time, and he speaks multiple languages, Spanish and in English. And we had a nice luncheon. He took me to predominantly Spanish speaking parts in Manchester. And he told the story of when he was in Rochester as a superintendent of Rochester, which is a city, I believe, and the kids who were bilingual kids who had a different experience, who had never been to a beach before, and so there was a picture of a frog who was sitting underneath a tree and relaxing, and the kids were asked to write a response back around the frog sitting underneath a tree. Well, half the kids have never seen a frog, and then they're sitting on the tree. They think, well, the frog, isn't, he's sleeping, he's not working, he's not relaxing, because these kids don't have that background knowledge. And I'm not trying to be difficult. But my point is that when we're dealing with standardized tests, we're dealing with the state, that they need to be cognizant in making sure that our kids have what I would call that universal background knowledge, and also the test reflects their culture and their history and their experiences too. Some of our, and again, I've seen mountains because I lived in Vermont. Some of our kids have not had that exposure, and I'd even go so far to say that some of our kids, when I call it the Velcro. When you come into schools, having exposure to literature, understanding the nuances of language, metaphors, similes, even having that level of exposure, some of our kids who are ELL, it just takes them a lot longer to acquire that. So it's a discussion that we have to champion, particularly in Nashua. I did this. I think I did it the last time I was here. I can see if I can find the PowerPoint. Um, uh, don't quote me on the numbers. I remember the biracial number sticks out to me because my family is of biracial descent. But I was thinking like 10 years ago, there was like a point one, 0.2% of families that identify as being biracial or having biracial. I'm not talking black and white. I'm talking Asian American white, Latino white. And now that number kind of fast forward is close to 10%. I think the population of people who identified as being white versus minority 10 years ago was at 85%. Now it's actually at, don't quote me on the numbers, but it's going down to 75% white and 25% of people of color. And in my hometown of Brockton, it used to be, and again, I grew up this, but my twin brother lives there, my mom still lives there. It used to be 90 something percent white, and the rest was of minorities. That's black, white, Asian, African American, and what have you. And now that number is close to maybe 30%, 50-50, if not more. So my point in sharing this all with you is that as the world becomes a lot browner, and I say browner because of multiracial, that number of being purely white in Nashua is going to continue to go down as our family structure and our marital interactions start to become much more diverse than it ever has before.
Follow up?
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. And hopefully the small contribution of the four ELL students will help. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a disparity of how the population has grown versus what we've accomplished in our schools, unfortunately. But I don't think it's necessarily insurmountable either. I think we can catch up. So this is a good start anyway, and hopefully, we keep seeing more additions to that. So.
Can I just add one little caveat to this? I think we've been talking about the acquisition of Spanish, and I think, or sorry, Spanish, but we also talk about the acquisition of kids who speak other languages of English. I also want to go on the back end of this and just kind of think a little bit as someone who just speaks exclusively English well. We live in a global economy now, and one of the things that I in my travels going to China, and I study the Chinese system of education, is that it's mandatory that the kids start English at like kindergarten. And by the time, the schools that I was at, and again, I was able to see first grade all the way up to high school, if not all of the kids at these schools were bilingual. And so part of this is that in this economy, in this world, it benefits our kids to speak not just exclusively English, but also be fluent and be cognizant and understand how to speak in other languages. And so when I worked in Sharon, it kind of, the answer the other side of your question is by far, if I had my dreams, and I would want every single kid who graduates out of the North and the South to be multilingual, to be able to communicate both fluently and in writing of a different language.
I would love that.
They certainly have that in Europe. So I've got some actual budget questions. The school capital reserve account, which is in the blue pages, It says we have $864,000 in that account.
Sounds right.
What page are you on?
So, it's 333. So that can be used for school construction. Have we tapped that at all recently? And the other part of the question is, are we still getting money from the state yet to supplement that number? I think it's coming, but I don't think we're getting it now. I think they shut the
There's-
tap off.
Yeah, the building aid is still, I mean, there's been a number of discussions around it and setting the program back up, but there is no funding for it at this point. We have received funding on the security side of things so we're,
That was my second question.
yes, so that, and we're hoping to get, you'll be getting a memo from me in the next few weeks. But we're looking, looks like we're gonna get another 400,000 or so, of which the state will pay 80% of that. We have to come up with 20%. But the school capital reserve was about 2.8 million, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, so we've used it a number of times.
Right.
We haven't, probably the last time we used it was 2 years ago.
Okay.
Um,
On the security money, that will take care of some portion of our schools, not 100% though, right?
Well, we've had, I think, 14 projects, and we've had funded, 12 of those are done, we've received the money. There's 2 that we haven't finished the work yet, we got extensions. This other set is all for vestibules for the most part in
Right.
the schools, which I think if you go to Broad Street or you go to Sunset and you
Charlotte
buzz
Ave.
in, you're not right in the school, you're in a vestibule, it's a lot safer.
Right.
So we're trying to build those in all the schools, so that the next chunk of security projects are, I think, all but 1 or 2 are
As it was
vestibule jobs.
very disturbing to see the news the last couple of days with another school shooting. And we have to find ways to make sure that people say, oh, it's not gonna happen here. Well, that's what those people all said, and it's not gonna happen here. Because we had Columbine a couple of years ago, so it will never happen again. Well, that didn't turn out right. And when you see the number of emergency people and vehicles that responded to that, imagine how much that costs. You know, we have to do, to spend a couple bucks and prevent it, and rather than spend a hell of a lot of money when it happens. So I think the security of our schools is critically important. But another piece of that is trying to identify the students in the school that might be having problems and not thinking straight. And I know that goes to the psychologists that you're looking for. But we probably don't, and people don't understand that as well when we're spending money on psychologists. Well, the kids tend to get lost in the school sometimes. And I've known some principals, assistant principals are very good at identifying that and straightening kids out, but we need more of that. And because if we don't identify these kids, they can be a potential problem. So, let me see. I think that answers most of my questions. Nobody has any additional questions for the school department? Thank you very much.
All right.
We will
Thank you.
be in touch.
You all do a wonderful job. Keep up the good work.
Heather, you got a tough job. Yeah. All right, Alderman O'Brien.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to table AHA 19-123.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to table the budget, R 19-123, until our next meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. General discussion. Okay, this was our last department. The next item that we have coming up, what did I just do with that? is the, oh, here it is. The public hearing on May 16th. Yes?
Have my thumb drive?
Oh, you want that back?
Sorry.
You wouldn't be, you'd be
I don't know if I
surprised what's
pull it
on
out,
it.
are you
No,
gonna?
you can pull it out.
Yeah.
Mr. Donovan, thank you. Can we get a copy of those slides so we can share with the rest of the,
Yes. I'll send you
thanks.
those in a couple of hours.
Yeah. Okay, where was I? Ah, so the public hearing is Thursday, May 16th at Nashua High North in the auditorium. And for those that haven't been through it before, the mayor and the chief financial officer will be up on the stage, as well as myself, and until she escapes, the city clerk. We usually let her go, so she didn't have to sit there. But it's a formal meeting. We'll go through the formal procedure. The aldermen usually sit in the front row. And then people can come up and ask questions about the budget, and we'll have someone from every one of the departments there. And usually they outnumber the public by about 10 to 1. They'll ask questions, and the mayor or the chief financial officer will try to answer them. If they can't, they'll bring somebody up from that department to answer the question. And then on Monday, May 20th, 7 p.m., right here, we will have our first wrap-up session. And if we complete that wrap-up and push the budget back to the full board, the second reading of this resolution will be May 28th. And then, but if we don't wrap it up on that session, the next meeting will be the 29th, and 29th and 30th will be additional wrap-up if we need them. And then June 4th and 6th if we need them. And then the budget would go to a September 11th. Has to be approved by then. So,
June 11th?
June 11th, yeah, board meeting.
You
Alderman
said
Kelly?
September.
You said September.
Did I say September?
You did.
Don't
You
say
did.
Ooh, bad.
That was
Yes.
a big jump. Just for my knowledge as a fairly new budget member, last year we didn't have to go into extra wrap-ups. What makes us go into extra wrap-ups? Is it,
Lack
we
of
need
money?
more you know what I mean? Is it like we didn't have the
So-
information, we wanted someone to come back? Like, what
So
would?
there's a number of things that we will have to take up in the wrap-up session. I don't know if everybody got a copy, but I got a request from the mayor. They forgot to put in the half for the grant writer, so we will have to take a motion to add that to the budget.
Yeah.
Should be fairly easy to pass. And then any other motions that you want to take. Now, to increase the budget at the full board level, you need 10 votes. Anything above the mayor's budget, you need 10 votes at the full board level. I mean, we can pass things here and send it to the full board, but when it gets there, if they don't have questions about what our motions were, they agree with them, and the budget went up even $1, we'll need 10 votes. All right? The budget goes down, unlikely, you only need 8 votes. Right?
That's fair.
Yes, Ben?
Couple of questions. If the, and I'm gonna ask this through you to President Wilshire, because I'm not sure. If the budget is, if we move money from one, if the motion is to move from X account over to Z account, right, but it doesn't change the bottom line of the budget, at the full board, how many votes does that take to make that motion?
The gating factor is the end number that the mayor gave us. If it's $1 above that, we need 10 votes.
Okay,
If it's $1 below that, we only need 8 votes, or if it's the mayor's budget, we only need 8 votes. Yes, you can make motions to take it out of A and put it in B, if you think that A can stand the loss.
Right.
So what I would ask is to formulate more motions. If you have questions, I've been through this a couple times. So if you want to filter it through me, I can tell you, whether it needs, the wording needs to be changed. And then you can make the motion at the wrap-up session the budget members in the budget committee will vote on it. And if it passes here, then it goes to the full board. But again, the bottom line thing going to the full board is the number above the mayor's budget. Yes, Alderman
So,
Jones?
so my other follow-up is, is it possible for us to have CFO Griffin and Treasurer Fredette here at one of the wrap-up sessions so that we might be able to ask them questions about certain items?
Certainly. Because
Great.
right now, I don't know where the shell game, under which one of the shells, the 200,000 is hiding. I don't know if they've moved it yet to a special contingency account or just how they've done that. There are a couple other questions of the budget that I've had discussions with the mayor. I still don't know where they put stuff, so yes, they will be here.
Great, because I have a couple of ideas and things that I would like to see happen, and I, obviously want to keep under the mayor's 3% tax increase, or at least at that. So I think I have a few ideas of how we might be able to do that, but I think it would be helpful if they were here to discuss the impacts of what we might propose.
So I had asked questions of CFO concerning where we were relative to the 3%. We were within $60,000, and the mayor just sent us that. I think it's 54,000.
Yeah.
So we're within about $6,000.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty close.
Yep.
To keep it under the 3%. So we have to go from there. Now, we don't have to stay at the mayor's budget. We just need 10 votes. There are a few things that came up. I'm not saying we go hog wild and stuff. Definitely not, because that's 3%'s a big number. But, just to go through a couple departments, the police department has a critical amount of money that they need. You had a discussion with the fire chief on something else. You can make those motions, and if you want to make a motion to reduce from column A to put money in column B, that's fine.
Yep. Great.
Oh, I thought you. Yes, Alderman Jettie?
So, at one of the early sessions when CFO Griffin was here, he was asked what what the numbers were for the tax cap, the spending cap. And he said that he could figure it out, but he didn't know what it was. He couldn't answer the question at that point. And he was going to get back to us. So could you ask him to kind of tell us where?
The reason the equation was not in the book is he had directions from Corporation Counsel not to put it in there. Because as Alderman O'Brien can tell you, when we were in court, when the judge said that the spending cap is not legal because it's not in correlation with state law, that's the current ruling that's on there. Now, they've challenged it, but actually the challenge that they took to Superior Court is whether or not they have standing to bring suit. If they determine they have standing, I won't get into the legal part of it. You guys can fight that out. But if they have standing, it's going to come back to the same court. And,
So
even if they were successful in their lawsuit, it'll only take 10 votes here to override it.
be that as it may, I think the formulation of the spending cap is a mathematical formula, and it's not any big secret. As I admitted before, I'm not a mathematician, so I can't do it. But you know, it's public knowledge and,
So I can ask
I-
the question, if it were legal, what would the number be?
right.
But it's
Wh- wh-
definitely lower than the 3%.
Whatever the judge said about it being enforceable on the Superior Court level, you know, we're still entitled to know what it is, just for our own information.
Hmm.
And, you know, I watched the Supreme Court argument today, and, you know, it's impossible to try to guess what Supreme Court judges are going to do based upon their interaction in the oral argument. But I can tell you from my watching it, it's, you know, I have no idea what they're going to do. And they talked about, you know, different judges talked about different scenarios as to how they could, you know, possibly rule on this. So, you know, you're right. We could override it if it is enforceable. We could override it with 10 votes. But I think we're entitled to know where we stand on
Okay.
that, what the numbers come out to.
Back in the day when my father was, and my uncle were both judges, I gave up a long time ago trying to figure out how a judge is gonna rule. It's like a guessing game, because they can change their mind after they go behind closed doors. But anyway, so yeah, I'll find out what that number is. And so we're into remarks by Alderman. Alderman O'Brien.
Yeah, just for the record, welcome to Alderman Schmidt, who did join us at 7:27 this evening. So for the record, you are here, so.
Okay, no remarks by Alderman. We have no need for a non-public. Alderman O'Brien.
A motion to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. We're adjourned at 9:32 PM.